We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Aleph Amid Beis Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 31b. On the previous summit, Rav Ashi asked, what if by a carbon there's an intention that a kazayis is going to be eaten outside of the proper time, but by two people? Is that a situation of pigul or not? And the question is based on the idea, do we say that there is a shear of kazayis here with regards to the intention, so it should be pigul? Or do we look at each person eating? Each person is eating only a half a zayis. That's not enough of a shear. And Abai in the previous summit said that we can bring a proof from our Mishnah, because our Mishnah said you can't combine a half a zayis lechol, that somebody's going to eat a half a zayis outside of the proper time, and also having an intention that a half a zayis is going to be burned, lahaktir, outside of the proper time. Those two do not combine. And so the Gemara now continues and infers, halechol v'lechol dumya delechol lahaktir. Let's say it would be a case of eating and eating, similar to eating and burning, meaning two people, each one eating a half a zayis. So it sounds like, again, v'hechi damian, what would be the case, b'shnei b'nei adam, again with two people. So then mitzdarif, it sounds like that would combine. It's only because it's lechol and lahaktir that they don't combine, but lechol and lechol would in fact combine. And the Gemara says, Shema Mino, indeed you see from our Mishnah that they do combine. Rashi explains, halechol v'lechol l'shnayim. If two people are eating dumya delechol lahaktir, similar to eating and burning, she'ein zayis shalem la'ochel echad, where you don't have a full zayis for one person eating, mitzdarif, so then it would combine. And the Gemara continues, boy, Rava asked the following question, Chishav lechol kazayis b'yeser mechdei achilas prasma. What if he has intention that a kazayis is going to be eaten outside of the proper time, but it's going to be eaten over a longer period of time, more than a kadei achilas pras, so maybe that's not considered to be achila. Usually we say that eating a kazayis, for it to be considered eating, it has to be that the kazayis is eaten during the time that it takes to eat what's called kadei achilas pras. So what's the halacha? La achilas gavoa midamin anle. Do we compare this to achilas gavoa, which is when it's eaten, consumed, so to speak, by the Almighty? We'll see Rashi in a moment. Ola achilas hediot, midamin alei, or maybe we compare it to regular eating, where it has to be a kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. And Rashi explains, b'yeser michdei achilas pras, again, in more than the time of achilas pras, lishos ben tchilas achilas u'lesofa, meaning there's a delay from when he starts eating to when he concludes. Yoser michdei achilas pras, more than what's called kadei achilas pras. The ilo gabe kol isurim shevatorah kaim alon, because by isurim in the Torah we've established the lo have achila. If you eat it, but you drag out the eating over a longer period of time than kadei achilas pras, that's not called achila. So hachamai, so what would be over here? And the Gemara said, do we say la'achilas gavoa midamin and lo? We compare it to achilas gavoa, to ha'iskesh l'inyan machshava, achilas gavoa, va'achilas adam b'hadei adadi. Because when it comes to intention, the consumption by the mizbeach and the consumption by people are compared. V'achilas gavoa af b'yoser michdei achilas prasi. When it comes to the mizbeach consuming a carbon, that could be more than achilas pras. Pa'amim she'enu memar l'isrov, because sometimes it's not quick that it burns up what's being burned on the mizbeach. And so that's the question over here again. Does it need to be a kazayis b'chdei achilas pras? And the Gemara continues, Amar Abai says, Tashma, coming here, a proof from the Mishnah again, Lechol kechatzi zayis ulahakter kechatzi zayis kosher, she'ein achila v'haktar mitzdarfen. It says if he has intention to eat a half a zayis outside the proper time and to burn a half a zayis outside of the proper time, so that's kosher because the achila, the eating, and the haktar, the burning, do not combine. And so time with the lechol ulahakter, again, the reason it doesn't combine is because it's eating and burning. Halechol v'lechol mitzdaref, but eating and eating would combine, and therefore the idea over here is eating and eating, meaning even over a longer period of time. And when it comes to burning, that is more time than achilas pras. That's the idea of achila, and achila would be mitzdarif in a similar situation that we have by haktara. But the Gemara says not necessarily. Dilma maybe behesed gadol. We're talking where there is a large fire. And Rashi explains, Hachi Garsin in the proper text is as follows, Lechol v'lechol, eating and eating, dumya de lahakter, similar to burning, mitzdarif, it would combine. Vehechi dami, and what would be the case? Yoser michdei achilas pras, it's again more than the amount of time of kadei achilas pras, Lechol chatzi zayis, meaning a half a zayis is eaten, v'lachzor v'lechol chatzi zayis, and then he eats another half a zayis, again over that longer period of time, ubein zelazeh yoser michdei achilas pras, between the two eatings, there is more than a kadei achilas pras, dumya de haktar, that's similar to the case of Haktar, to burning on the Mizbeach, Mitzdarif, so it would combine. And the Gemara said, Dilma hai lahaktir de katani. Maybe when it says over here lahaktir, meaning when the Mishnah mentions burning, behesed gadol kamer, it's talking about a large fire, and so therefore it is consumed quickly. With the chavasa davka lechol v'lechol de mitzdarif, and maybe only in that kind of situation do we say that achila and achila are mitzdarif, meaning it does have to be in that shorter period of time of kedei achilas pras. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Lechol kachatzi zayis ulahaktir kachatzi zayis kosher. Let's say the carbon is brought and there's a wrong intention on a half a zayis to eat the half a zayis, let's say at the wrong time or the wrong place, and then to burn half of a zayis on the mizbeach at the wrong time or the wrong place. So those are not mitzdarif. Achil and haktar again are not mitzdarif, and therefore the carbon is kosher. And the Gemara says, Taimud delechol ulahaktir. The reason why they don't combine is because one of the intentions had to do with achila, with eating the carbon, and the other intention had to do with haktara, with burning the carbon. So those two kinds of intentions do not combine. Halechol v'lechol davar she'in darko lechol. Let's say it was to eat a half a zayis and then to eat something which is normally not eaten, meaning to say something that is normally burned on the mizbeach. So take the same items, the chatzi zayis lechol and the chatzi zayis lahaktir, those same items, but instead talk about eating and eating. So you're eating one item which is normally eaten and eating something which is not normally eaten. So then mitzdarif, so apparently those would combine. And the problem is, hakatani reisha, but didn't we learn in the beginning of the Mishnah, lechol is shadarko lechol, it says it has to be eating something that normally is eaten. As shadarko lechol in, she'in darko lo. It has to be something that's eaten, that already can be an intention that can count for pigul and for disqualification, but if it's eating something that's not normally eaten, so that doesn't count. And so the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Hamani, who is the author of the Mishnah? Rabbi Eliezer, it's Rabbi Eliezer. The Amar Mechashvin me'achilas adam la'achilas mizbeach, or me'achilas mizbeach la'achilas adam. This part of the Mishnah, which seems to imply even something that is not normally eaten, let's say something that's normally burned on the mizbeach, it follows Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer says you can have intention from something which is normally eaten by a person to the achilas mizbeach, and vice versa, something that's normally consumed by the mizbeach to achilas adam. And where do we see that Rabbi Eliezer says that? It's not, as we learned in the Mishnah. This is the Mishnah coming up. Hashochet es hazevach, if somebody slaughters a carbon, lechol davar shein darko lechol, to eat something again that's not normally eaten with that wrong intention, ulahaktir davar shein darko lahaktir, to burn something that's not normally burned on the mizbeach. So those kinds of intentions, kosher, it's still going to be kosher. That's not going to count to make the carbon posel or make the carbon pigul. For Rabbi Eliezer posel, but Rabbi Eliezer says it is in fact disqualified, because that does count. You're able to be mechashvin. We say that we're able to have intention from achilas adam to achilas mizbeach, and vice versa. And so therefore, again, this part of the Mishnah is going to follow Rabbi Eliezer. And the Gemara continues, Abaye Amar Abaye says, Afilu Tema Rabbanon. You can even say that this part of the Mishnah follows the Rabbanon. Velo Tema, but don't draw the inference that Halechol Velechol Davar Shein Darko Lechol, that if he were to have intention about eating something that normally is eaten and eating something that normally is not eaten, that's not the inference that you should draw. Ela Ema, rather say the inference as follows. Halechol Velechol Davar Shein Darko Lechol, if he has intention to eat something, to eat a half a zayis and to eat another half a zayis, things that are normally eaten, that's what the Mishnah means. In other words, you shouldn't take the exact same items that we're talking about at the end of the Mishnah, the kachatzi zayis lechol and the kachatzi zayis lahaktir, and those exact same items, lechol v'lechol. That's not the proper inference to draw. Rather, it's that we can combine two achilos, assuming that these are things that are normally eaten. But the Gemara says, "My kamashmalon." But if that's the inference we're drawing, so what's the end of the Mishnah teaching us? Idavar shadarko lechol kamashmalon. If it's teaching us that something that's normally eaten, that you're able to combine those chatzi zeisim, you're able to combine those partial shiurim. But mereisha shmamina, we already know that from the beginning of the Mishnah. It says kachatzi zayis bachutz, kachatzi zayis l'mocher. If he has intention, a half a zayis outside the proper place, half a zayis tomorrow outside the proper time. So puzzle. So we say that they combine, and we say puzzle. We say it's disqualified. So that can't be the chiddush of the end of the Mishnah. And ilechol lahaktir, and if the chiddush of the Mishnah at the end is talking about eating and burning, that those do not combine. But midukya dereisha shmamina, don't we know that from the inference of the beginning of the Mishnah? Because it said lechol davar shedarko lechol in she'ein darko lechol lo. It says if you're eating something, you have intention to eat something that normally is eaten. So there, yes, we say that is a machshava that can combine and that can render the carbon puzzle or pigul. But if it's something that's not normally eaten, we don't say that. And how does that show this idea? Hashta now, umal lechol v'lechol davar shein darko lechol lo mitzdarif. If you're going to say that if he's having intention to eat something, something that is normally eaten and something that is not normally eaten, that lo mitzdarif, if those don't combine. So lechol lahaktir mi boy. So then, let's say to eat and to burn that item, because again, we're talking about an item which is not normally eaten and it's burned. So it's obvious if you're having intention on a half a zayis to eat it, and then a half a zayis on something else that's supposed to be burned, that you're going to burn it. It's obvious that that's not going to combine. So what do we even need to teach that for at the end of the Mishnah? But the Gemara says it's not necessarily so obvious, because lechol lahaktir itzrich, because lechol lahaktir is necessary, meaning even though we know that if the person has intention, let's say, to eat a half a zayis of something that is normally eaten, and then to eat a half a zayis, let's say, outside of the proper place of something that's not normally eaten, even though we know that that doesn't combine, it does not necessarily follow from there that lechol lahaktir won't combine. Why? Because one might have thought, Hasam hu, over there, the lav ki orche kamechashiv, his intention is not to do what's normally done with this item. Aval hacha, but over here, v'hai ki orche, here he's having intention on a half a zayis to eat something that is normally eaten, and then he's having intention to burn on the mizbeach a half a zayis, that's something that's normally burned on the mizbeach. So therefore it's ki orche. It's the normal way that you treat these items of the carbon. So emo let's starif. So then I might say that it does combine. And so kamash malon, that's what the chiddush is at the end of the Mishnah, teaching you exactly what it's saying, that it does not combine in that case. Hadron aloch kol hazvachim shekiblu daman. We return to you. Parak kol hazvachim shekiblu daman. This is the end of the second parak of Meseches Zevachim. If you're enjoying these videos on this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. And take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will now begin the third parak of Meseches Zevachim. And the parak begins with the Mishnah, Kol hapsulin sheshachtu, all those who are disqualified, who slaughter by a carbon, shchitasun kasher, so the slaughtering is kosher, meaning even someone who's disqualified to do other parts of the avoda, like the receiving of the blood, the conveying of the blood, the throwing of the blood, but that doesn't apply by shchita, just like a non-kohen is able to shech the carbon, so to anyone who's disqualified can do the shchita of the carbon. Shashchita ksheira bezarim, because the slaughtering is kosher by non-kohanim, uvenoshim, and with women, uviavodim, with slaves, uvitmeim, and with those that are tamei, v'afilu b'kotshei kotshim, and this is true even by kotshei kotshim, even for example a carbon oler, a carbon chatos, this is true as well. Uvilvad shelo yutameim nogen bebasar, but as long as those who are tamei, they don't touch the meat, they don't make the carbon tamei. Lefikach, and therefore hein poslim b'machshava, they can disqualify with a wrong intent, meaning since they are kosher to do the shchita, if they have a wrong intention by the shchita, that does create a disqualification. Rashi explains, Kol hapsulin sheshachtu shchitasan ksheira kediyalef b'Gemara. This will be learned out in the Gemara that the slaughtering is kosher. Uvitmeim, and then with those who are tamei, Rashi says b'tamei sheretz kamer. Now we're talking specifically about somebody who becomes tamei by a sheretz. A sheretz is an avatuma, so the person who becomes tamei from the sheretz is a rishon l'tumah. She'eno metame kli. Now somebody who's a rishon is not able to be metame a kli to lav avatumahu, because he's not an avatuma. He became tamei from the sheretz, so he cannot be metame the kli, so it's not going to be a problem that he's being metame the knife that he's using for the shchita. O betame mace, or we could be talking about a tame mace. Now a tame mace is an avatuma, but if that's the case, so isn't it a problem that he's making the knife tame? It's possible, for example, to examine a reed that's sharp, and you can slaughter with that. That's not mekabel tuma. Avol besakin lo, but with a knife, no, that would be a problem. Shu metame es hasakin, because then what's going to happen is he'll be metame the knife. Vasakin metame es habasar, and the knife will then go ahead and be metame the meat. Uchegon da'avid sakin aricha v'shachid, and again, the cases where he made a long knife and he did the shchita in that fashion, and so again, that will have to be the situation of tame, so that it doesn't convey any tumah to the meat of the carbon. And Rashi continues, Lafika chein poslan, therefore they are able to disqualify with their intention, as like carbon b'machshava, they can disqualify the carbon with their wrong intention. Im shachtu b'machshava, again, if they slaughter it with some kind of intention, let's say outside the proper place, outside the proper time. Hoel v'uru'uyin la'avoda zu, since they're fit to do this avoda, machshavtan machshava, so their intention is considered an intention that can in fact disqualify. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph.